The DNA results arrived on a Thursday afternoon, tucked inside an unmarked envelope that felt heavier than paper had any right to feel. Kofi Mensah stood in his study, the door locked, his hands trembling as he stared at the document that would either confirm his greatest hope or shatter his understanding of everything he thought he knew. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. He read it again, and one more time, because surely this was a mistake. Surely the universe was not this cruel, or this kind. He could not decide which. Probability of maternity, 99.98%. The woman sleeping down the hall. The caregiver who had walked into his home 3 months ago and somehow convinced his impossible son to trust again. The stranger who felt so inexplicably familiar. She was Kwame's mother. And he, the man who had hired her to care for a child she did not know was hers, he was Kwame's father, not through adoption, not through paperwork and legal proceedings and carefully constructed lies, through blood, through a night in Lagos 6 years ago that he had tried so desperately to forget, through a connection that fate had buried and then unearthed in the most impossible way imaginable. Now, before I tell you what happened next, I need you to understand something. This is not just a story about coincidence. This is a story about a mother's love that refused to die even when she was told her child had. This is a story about a man who ran from his mistakes only to discover that the universe has a way of making us face what we tried to escape. And this is a story about a little boy whose heart knew the truth before anyone spoke it out loud. If you have not watched part 1 of this story, I highly recommend you pause right now and go watch it first. The link is in the description and pinned in the comments. Trust me, you will want to understand everything that led to this moment. And if you are already invested in this journey, make sure you are subscribed and that notification bell is turned on, because what happens next changed everything, not just for this family, but quite possibly for how you think about fate, forgiveness, and the lengths a parent will go to find their child. Let me take you back, just for a moment, so you understand the magnitude of what was about to unfold. 3 months earlier, Kofi Mensah had been a desperate man. His 7-year-old son, Kwame, had driven away 14 caregivers in 8 months. 14 trained professionals who had arrived with confidence and departed with resignation letters, tear-stained faces, and stories about a child who seemed determined to make everyone abandon him before they could choose to leave on their own. Then, Ya Asantewa walked through the door. She was 28 years old with eyes that carried the weight of unspoken grief and a quiet strength that did not flinch when Kwame threw a glass of juice directly at her face during their first meeting. She did not yell. She did not threaten. She did not leave. And something in Kwame recognized something in her. He could not explain it. Neither could she. But from the very first week, the dynamic was different. The boy who had weaponized his intelligence and his pain against every adult who tried to get close began, slowly and reluctantly, to lower his walls. Ya read him stories, not from books but from her imagination, tales of brave children who overcame impossible odds, tales that seemed to speak directly to the fears Kwame could not articulate. She made him laugh, genuine laughter that echoed through hallways that had been silent for too long. She never promised him she would stay forever. She simply stayed, day after day, night after night, present in a way that no one else had been since his mother walked out when he was 2 years old. And Kofi watched, at first with skepticism, then with curiosity, then with something that felt dangerously like hope. But there was something else, something he could not name, a familiarity in Ya's features that nagged at him during quiet moments, the particular shade of brown in her eyes, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, the shape of her face in certain lighting. He knew her. He was certain of it. But from where? The answer to that question would destroy him, and then, somehow, rebuild him into someone worth being. Meanwhile, Ya was fighting her own battle with the truth. She had walked into the Mensah estate for a job, a simple caregiving position that would help her continue rebuilding a life that had been shattered 6 years ago. She had not expected to feel anything beyond professional dedication. But then she saw Kwame, and her heart stopped. The shape of his eyes, the stubborn set of his jaw, the particular way his forehead creased when he was concentrating. She knew these features. She had imagined them 1,000 times. She had dreamed about the child she lost, wondering what he would look like as he grew. She had been told her baby died. Complications during delivery, they said, at a facility in Togo where her parents had sent her to hide their shame. A pregnant, unmarried daughter, a family reputation to protect, a problem to be quietly resolved. They never let her see the body. They never gave her closure. They simply sent her home and expected her to move on as if 9 months of carrying life inside her had meant nothing. But a mother knows, even when everyone tells her she is wrong, even when the grief is supposed to have passed, even when moving on is the only logical option, a mother knows. And from the moment Ya looked into Kwame's eyes, something inside her whispered what her mind refused to accept. This is your son. She could not act on suspicion. She could not make accusations without proof. If she was wrong, she would lose access to this child who needed her desperately. If she was right, she would need evidence that no one could dispute. So she stayed. She watched. She gathered what information she could without raising suspicion, and she contacted the one person who had believed her when no one else would. Sister Beatrice had been investigating the facility in Togo for years, a network of corruption that preyed on vulnerable young women and sold their babies to wealthy families desperate for heirs. The operation was sophisticated, the paperwork impeccable, the secrets buried deep, but not deep enough. While Ya was earning Kwame's trust, Sister Beatrice was following a trail of documents and buried records that led directly to the Mensah family. And while both women were closing in on the truth, Kofi was conducting his own investigation. He could not shake the feeling that he had met Ya before. The familiarity haunted him through business meetings and sleepless nights. It drove him to hire a private investigator, to dig into her background, to search for the connection his subconscious already recognized. The investigator found it in a hotel registry from Lagos, 6 years ago. And suddenly Kofi remembered everything. He had been at his lowest point, recently divorced, drinking too much, running from the failure of a marriage that had crumbled under the weight of his wife's infertility and his own emotional unavailability. He had attended a conference that he barely remembered, stayed at a luxury hotel, and met a beautiful young woman at the bar who looked as lost as he felt. She had been 22, rejected from medical school, drowning in family expectations she could not meet, looking for escape the same way he was. They had connected, talked for hours, and then he did not remember much of what happened after. The alcohol had blurred the details, but he remembered waking up alone, remembering fragments of a night that felt like a fever dream, leaving the hotel before she woke up because facing her would mean facing himself. He had been a coward. He had taken something precious and walked away without looking back. And now, 6 years later, the universe had brought her back into his life, as the caregiver for his son, as the woman who had somehow reached a child that no one else could touch, as, quite possibly, that child's biological mother. The DNA test was supposed to provide clarity. Instead, it provided confirmation of the most complicated truth imaginable. Kwame was not adopted, not really. He had been stolen, taken from a mother who was told he died and given to a father who never knew he existed. And now both of those parents were living under the same roof, caring for the same child, falling into something that felt dangerously like family, without knowing the full truth of what they already were. If this revelation is hitting you the way it hit me when I first discovered this story, I need you to do something. Drop a comment right now and tell me, have you ever uncovered a truth that completely changed how you saw your own life? Have you ever discovered that something you believed was solid ground was actually built on lies you never suspected? Because that is exactly where Kofi found himself as he stared at those DNA results, standing on ground that was crumbling beneath his feet, knowing that the conversation he was about to have would either build a bridge or burn everything down. He found Ya in the garden that evening. She was sitting beneath the large mango tree where she often read to Kwame, but the boy had already gone to bed. She looked peaceful in the fading light, completely unaware that her entire world was about to shift. Kofi sat down beside her. He did not speak immediately. Instead, he watched the last rays of sunlight paint gold across her features, features that he recognized, features that he had seen reflected in his son's face every single day without making the connection. How could he have been so blind? "Ya," he finally said. "We need to talk." She turned to look at him, and he saw wariness in her eyes, the guarded expression of someone who had learned not to trust easily. "Is something wrong with Kwame?" "No, Kwame is fine. This is about something else." He pulled the envelope from his jacket pocket, the DNA results that would change everything. He held it between them but did not hand it over. "Not yet." Before I show you this, I need to ask you something. And I need you to answer honestly. Of course. 6 years ago, were you in Lagos? Her face went pale, the color draining so quickly that he thought she might faint. Her hands gripped the armrest of the bench, knuckles white with sudden tension. Why are you asking me that? Please, just answer the question. Yes, I was in Lagos. For a few days. I was dealing with something difficult, and I needed to get away. And while you were there, did something happen? Something you could not explain. Ya stood up abruptly, wrapping her arms around herself as if suddenly cold despite the warm evening air. I do not want to talk about this, I know. But we need to, because I was in Lagos too, 6 years ago, at the Grand Continental Hotel. She froze, completely still, not even breathing. I was at my lowest point, Kofi continued. I had just gone through a divorce. I was drinking too much. I met a woman at the bar, a beautiful woman who seemed as lost as I was. We talked for hours. And then, stop. I need to finish. Please. We spent the night together. And the next morning, I left, without saying goodbye, without leaving my name or number. I was a coward, Ya. I took something precious and I walked away. The silence stretched between them, heavy, suffocating, pregnant with 6 years of secrets. It was you, she whispered. You were the man from that night. Yes, I tried to find you. After I discovered I was pregnant, I went back to the hotel. I asked everyone. But you had already checked out, and nobody would give me your information. Pregnant? Kofi's voice cracked on the word. Even though he already knew, even though he had the DNA test in his hand, hearing her confirm it made the ground tilt beneath his feet. I was carrying your child. For 9 months, I carried a baby that I loved from the moment I knew he existed. My parents found out. They were furious. They sent me to a facility in Togo to give birth, away from everyone I knew, away from anyone who might ask questions. What happened? They told me he died. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. They told me there were complications, that my baby was stillborn. They never let me see him, never let me hold him. They just took him away and expected me to pretend that the last 9 months had not happened. Yeah, do you know what that does to a person? To be told that your child is dead and you never even got to say goodbye? I have spent 6 years grieving a baby I never held. 6 years wondering what I did wrong. 6 years trying to put myself back together. I know. How could you possibly know? Because he did not die. Ya's breath caught. Her entire body trembled as she processed his words. What did you say? Your baby did not die. They lied to you. They took him from you and they sold him to someone who could not have children of their own. Someone who was desperate enough to buy a child without asking where he came from. He handed her the envelope, watched her pull out the documents with shaking hands, watched her eyes scan the results, watched her collapse back onto the bench as the truth finally, irrevocably, settled into her bones. Kwame, she breathed. Kwame is my son. Yes, my baby is alive. My baby has been alive this whole time. And he has been living with me. Kofi finished. The father who never knew he existed. The man who abandoned you that morning in Lagos. They sat in silence. 2 people bound together by the most impossible circumstances. A night of escape that created a life. A conspiracy of lies that separated a mother from her child. A twist of fate that brought them back together without either of them understanding why. How long have you known? A few days. I started investigating when I realized you looked familiar. I could not shake the feeling that we had met before. When I found the hotel records, I ordered a DNA test. I needed to be sure before I said anything. Ya looked at him. Really looked. Taking in the man who had caused her so much pain without even knowing it. The man who had hired her to care for their son. The man whose eyes she saw every time she looked at Kwame's face. This is impossible. I know. We found each other by accident. I came here for a job. I had no idea that Kwame was, that he could be. Neither did I. Until I saw how he responded to you. How he trusted you when he had not trusted anyone in years. How he looked at you like you were the answer to every prayer he did not know how to pray. He knew. She whispered. Somehow, he knew. Children know things that adults forget how to recognize. Maybe he felt the same thing you felt. That connection that could not be explained. Ya was quiet for a long moment, processing, grieving, raging against 6 years that could never be returned. Then she looked up, fire replacing tears. I want to tell him. He deserves to know the truth. I agree. But we need to do it carefully. He's already been through so much. He has been through so much because someone stole him from me. Because I was not there to protect him. Because you did not stay. The accusation hit its mark. Kofi flinched, but did not look away. You are right. I did not stay. I was a coward and a fool, and I have regretted that morning every day since. But I did not know, Ya. I did not know you were pregnant. I did not know what they would do to you. If I had known, if you had known, what? You would have come back? You would have done the right thing. Yes, I would have. She searched his face for deception and found none. We cannot change what happened. We can only decide what happens now. And what happens now is that I tell my son that I am his mother, that I have been here all along, that I am never leaving him again. We tell him together. He's going to have questions about both of us, about why we did not recognize each other sooner, about everything. Together, the word hung between them. An agreement, a beginning, the first fragile thread of something that might eventually become a family. They told Kwame the next morning. The little boy sat in the playroom where he had once thrown juice at Ya's face. The same room where his walls had begun to crumble. The same room where he had started to believe that maybe, just maybe, not everyone would leave. Now his parents sat across from him, their faces serious in a way that made his stomach tight with worry. Am I in trouble? He asked. No, sweetheart. Ya's voice was gentle. You are not in trouble. We just need to tell you something important. Is it about the thing where I put beetles in the gardener's shoes? Because technically that was science. I was testing how fast they could climb. Despite the gravity of the moment, both adults smiled. It is not about the beetles, Kofi said, although we will be discussing that later. Then what? Ya took a deep breath. Kwame, you know how you have always felt like something was missing? Like there was a piece of your story that did not make sense? The boy nodded slowly. His intelligence was evident in his eyes as he processed her words. I felt it too. From the moment I walked into this house and met you, I felt like I knew you. Like my heart recognized you, even though my mind had never seen you before. What are you saying? I am saying that I am your mother, Kwame. Not the woman who left when you were 2. Not someone who adopted you or was hired to care for you. I am your real mother. The one who carried you for 9 months and loved you before you even took your first breath. Kwame was silent, his face unreadable, processing. Kofi continued, and I am your real father, not because of adoption papers, because you are my biological son, my blood, my family. But how? The boy's voice was small, confused, hoping and fearing in equal measure. They explained, as gently as they could, the night in Lagos, the pregnancy, the lies, the facility that stole babies from their mothers, the years of separation, the impossible coincidence that brought them back together. So when I felt like Miss Ya was supposed to be here, when I told the other nannies that they were not my real mother, but I never said that about her, I was right. Yes, baby, you were right. And the woman who left, the one I thought was my mother, she adopted you, Kofi explained, but she was given false information. She was told you were an orphan who needed a home. She did not know you had been stolen. Kwame was quiet for a long time, processing more information than any 7-year-old should have to process, rewiring his understanding of his own existence. Then he looked up, his eyes bright with tears he refused to let fall. So, you did not leave me. No, baby. Ya's voice broke. I never left you. I was told you died. I grieved for you every single day for 6 years. I never stopped loving you. I never stopped wanting you. They just made it impossible for me to find you. Until now. Until now. Kwame stood up from his chair. He walked across the room, past his toys and his books and all the defenses he had built to protect himself from being abandoned again. And he climbed into Ya's lap. Mother, he said, testing the word, feeling how it fit in his mouth, how it felt to say it to someone who would not leave. Yes, my love. I knew. I did not know that I knew, but I knew. You felt like home from the very beginning. Ya held him, Her son. Her child who had been alive all along. She held him and cried. 6 years of tears that she had been holding back. 6 years of grief transforming into overwhelming, impossible joy. Across the room, Kofi watched. The woman he had wronged and the child he had never known. His family, broken apart by lies and brought back together by something stronger than deception. He walked over and knelt beside them, wrapping his arms around them both. A circle of healing that was only beginning. "Does this mean I can call you mother and father now?" Kwame asked, his voice muffled against Ya's shoulder. "Yes. And we will all live together? Like a real family?" "Yes. And you promise you will never leave? Both of you?" Kofi and Ya looked at each other, at the child who had every reason to doubt, at the trust he was offering despite everything. "We promise," they said together. "Good." Kwame pulled back, his face serious. "Because I have been thinking about this family situation for a long time, and I have some suggestions for improvement." Despite the tears, despite the weight of everything that had been revealed, both parents laughed. "Of course you do," Kofi said. "First, we need to establish that bedtime should be negotiable based on the quality of the story being told. Second, vegetables should only be served with the express written consent of all parties under the age of 18. Now, hold on, Ya started. Third, and this is very important, you two need to get married immediately so that our family has proper documentation." "Married?" Both adults said together. "Obviously. You love me. You love each other, even if you are being weird about it. And I refuse to explain complicated custody arrangements to my friends at school. It is much simpler to just be married. Kwame, you cannot just..." "I am not finished. Fourth, I would like a sibling eventually. Not immediately, because I need time to prepare. But within the next 2 to 3 years would be acceptable. A brother preferably. But I will accept a sister if she is interesting. If this story has touched something in your heart, I want you to take a moment right now and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe someone who has lost hope about their own family. Maybe someone who is searching for something they think is gone forever. Stories like this remind us that impossible things happen every single day to people who refuse to give up. And while you are at it, hit that like button. Every single like helps more people discover stories that matter. Now let me tell you what happened next. Because the truth, as earth-shattering as it was only the beginning. Healing is not a straight line. It is messy and complicated, and full of moments where you take 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. The Mensah family was about to learn this firsthand. The first challenge came from Ya's parents. Chief and Mrs. Okonkwo arrived at the Mensah estate 2 weeks after the revelation, summoned by Ya for a conversation she had been dreading for 6 years. They walked into the living room looking older than she remembered, smaller, as if the weight of their secrets had compressed them over the years. "Ades." Her mother's voice trembled. "We are so glad you finally..." "Do not." Ya held up her hand. "Do not pretend that this is a happy family reunion. You know exactly why you are here. My daughter, please." Her father's voice was gentle, pleading. "Let us explain." "Explain? You gave away my child. You told me he was dead. For 6 years I mourned him. I fell into depression so deep I did not know if I would survive, and you just watched. You watched me suffer and you said nothing. We thought we were protecting you." "Protecting me?" Ya laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You were protecting yourselves, your reputation, your standing in the community. You could not bear the shame of having an unmarried daughter with a child, so you made the problem disappear. It was not like that. Then tell me what it was like. Tell me how you justified stealing my son and letting me believe he was dead." The room was silent, heavy with years of unspoken truths. "We were afraid," her mother finally admitted. "You were so young. You had no idea who the father was. Your future was destroyed. We thought if we found the baby a good home with a wealthy family, if we told you he had not survived, you could start fresh. You could forget and move on." "Forget? Do you hear yourself? You thought I could forget my child? The baby I carried for 9 months? The life I felt moving inside me? We made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to buy groceries. A mistake is missing an appointment. What you did was criminal. What you did was unforgivable." Chief Okonkwo looked at his daughter with tears streaming down his face. "If I could go back and change it, I would. I would give anything to undo what we did. But you cannot. That is the point. You cannot give me back 6 years with my son. You cannot undo the trauma he experienced growing up without his mother. You cannot fix what you broke. Kwame appeared in the doorway. He had been listening despite being told to stay in his room. His small face was serious as he studied the grandparents he had never known. "You are the people who took me away from my mother," he said. His voice was not angry, just factual, stating what he understood. "Kwame," her mother reached toward him. "I do not know you, but my mother says that people can make terrible mistakes and still deserve a chance to be better. She said that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to get sick." Ya smiled despite herself. She had told him that just last week. "So I will give you a chance. But you have to earn my trust. You cannot just expect me to love you because we share blood. Love is something you have to prove with actions, not just words." The wisdom coming from this 7-year-old rendered the adults speechless. "He is remarkable," Chief Okonkwo said quietly. "You have raised a remarkable child. I did not raise him. He was raised by strangers because of what you did. But yes, he is remarkable despite everything you put him through." Ya looked at her parents, at the people who had once been her whole world, who had made a decision that shattered everything she knew about love and family and trust. "I cannot forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But Kwame deserves to know his grandparents. So you will be allowed to visit, supervised, until I decide otherwise. Thank you. Do not thank me. Thank your grandson. He is more generous than I am." As her parents left, Kwame walked over and took Ya's hand. "Was that very hard for you?" "Yes, baby, it was. You looked like you wanted to cry, but you did not. That was very brave. Sometimes being brave means feeling the pain and not letting it control you. Is that what you are teaching me?" That is what we are learning together. As the weeks passed, the family found its rhythm. It was imperfect and messy and full of adjustments, but it was theirs. Kofi learned to leave work at a reasonable hour, to be present for bedtime stories and breakfast conversations and the small moments that make up a childhood. He was not naturally good at it. Years of emotional distance had made him rusty at connection. But he tried. Every day, he tried. Ya navigated the strange territory of being both mother and newcomer. Kwame had accepted her immediately, but integrating into a household with established routines and staff who had known him longer required patience. She brought her own traditions, her grandmother's recipes, songs from her childhood, stories she had been saving for a child she thought she would never meet. And Kwame blossomed. The angry, defensive little boy who had driven away 14 caregivers began to soften. He still had opinions about everything. He still challenged authority and asked uncomfortable questions and occasionally put insects in places insects should not be. But there was lightness now, joy that he no longer felt he had to suppress. "Father," he said one evening as Kofi was helping him with homework, "why did you leave my mother that morning in Lagos?" Kofi set down the pencil. This was a question he had been dreading. "I was scared. I had just gone through a very painful divorce. I was not thinking clearly, and I made a cowardly decision that I have regretted every day since." "Were you ashamed of her?" "No. I was ashamed of myself. I was ashamed of who I was in that moment. Running away was easier than facing the mess I had made of my life. That is a terrible reason." "Yes, it is. But you are different now, right? You would not run away anymore?" Kofi looked at his son, at this brilliant, perceptive child who deserved nothing but honesty. "I am trying to be different. Every day I try to make choices that the old me would not have made. But I cannot promise I will never make mistakes. What I can promise is that I will never run away from you, or your mother, no matter how hard things get." Kwame nodded slowly. "Okay, I believe you. But just so you know, if you ever make my mother cry again, I will be very disappointed. And my disappointment is devastating." So, I have heard. The first real test of their new family came from an unexpected direction. The organization that had facilitated Kwame's illegal adoption did not appreciate having their crimes exposed. Sister Beatrice's investigation had attracted attention from law enforcement, and the people responsible were facing serious consequences. But cornered animals are dangerous. Kofi received the threat late one night. A phone call from an unknown number, a voice that was calm in a way that promised violence. "Mr. Mensah, you have caused us a great deal of trouble. We suggest you encourage your friend Sister Beatrice to withdraw her investigation." Otherwise, certain documents might surface that would call into question your right to custody of the boy. What documents? Fabricated ones, of course. But by the time the courts sort out the truth, your family will be torn apart. Again. The line went dead. Kofi did not sleep that night. He sat in his study, weighing his options. He had resources, money, connections, but these people had proven they were willing to do anything to protect themselves. What is wrong? Ya appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a robe, concern etched across her face. He told her everything. The phone call, the threat, the fear that they might lose Kwame again just when they had finally become a family. He expected her to panic, to cry, to collapse under the weight of this new threat. Instead, her eyes went hard. They think they can threaten our child? They think after everything we have been through, we will back down because they made a phone call? Yeah, these are dangerous people. I do not care if they are demons from the underworld. They stole my son once. I will die before I let them take him again. I was thinking of a less dramatic approach. Such as using every legal and financial resource at my disposal to ensure these people spend the rest of their lives in prison where they belong. That works too. But if your approach fails, mine is still on the table. Despite the gravity of the situation, Kofi smiled. This woman, this fierce, impossible woman who had already survived more than most people could imagine. I understand now, he said quietly. Understand what? Why Kwame connected with you immediately. You have the same fire he does. The same refusal to be defeated. We are survivors, both of us. We learned early that the world does not protect you. You have to protect yourself. You do not have to do it alone anymore. Ya looked at him. At this man who had once abandoned her without a second thought, who had unknowingly set in motion the series of events that separated her from her child, but also at the man who had hired her when no other agency would take a chance on someone with her complicated history, who had been patient as she figured out her role in his household, who had faced the truth about their shared past with courage instead of denial. I know, she said simply. I know I do not have to do it alone. The battle was not easy, but it was thorough. Kofi mobilized his legal team. Sister Beatrice provided evidence that had been carefully gathered over years of investigation. Law enforcement agencies in multiple countries coordinated their efforts. Within 3 months, the network that had stolen children from their mothers was dismantled. The people responsible were arrested. The victims, including Ya, were able to tell their stories. And through it all, the Mensah family stood together. Kwame wrote a letter that was read at the trial. A letter from a 7-year-old who had spent most of his life feeling like something was missing. My name is Kwame Mensah, the letter began. I am 7 years old. When I was a baby, someone stole me from my mother and told her I was dead. She believed them for 6 years. She was sad for 6 years. I was angry for 6 years because I did not understand why I felt so alone. Then my mother found me. She did not know she was finding me. She just came to take care of me, and she did it so well that I stopped being angry. I stopped pushing people away. I started to feel like maybe I was worth loving after all. The people who stole me thought they were giving me a better life because my adoptive father was rich. But money is not what children need. Children need their mothers. Children need to know where they come from. Children need truth, even when it is hard. I am one of the lucky ones. My mother never stopped looking for me, even when she did not know she was looking. But there are other children out there who will never know their real families because of what these people did. Please make sure they can never do this again. Please make sure no other child has to feel the way I felt. Please make sure no other mother has to cry the way my mother cried. Thank you for listening to me. I am only 7, but I have a lot of thoughts about justice. If you want to hear more, I am available for follow-up questions. Sincerely, Kwame Mensah. The courtroom was not dry-eyed when the letter was finished being read. With the threat neutralized and the healing well underway, Kofi made a decision. He found Ya in the garden again. Their garden, the place where truth had been spoken and lives had been changed. Do you remember what Kwame said that first day? When we told him the truth about who we were, that we should get married immediately for proper documentation purposes? That, and also that love is something you prove with actions, not just words. Ya turned to look at him, sensing that something important was about to happen. For 6 years, I lived with the knowledge that I had failed someone. I did not know who, I did not know how, but I knew that somewhere out there was a woman I had wronged. A night I could not fully remember but could not fully forget either. Kofi, let me finish. When you walked into my house, something in me recognized something in you. I did not understand it then, but I felt it. Every time I watched you with Kwame, every time I saw the patience you had for his anger, every time you stayed when everyone else had left. She was crying now, silent tears that she did not wipe away. I am not the man I was in Lagos. I am not the coward who ran away from his problems. I am trying every day to be someone worthy of you, someone worthy of our son, and I know I have a long way to go. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. But I'm asking you, Ya Asentewa, to give me the chance to prove it. Every day, for the rest of our lives. Will you marry me? She did not answer immediately. She looked at the ring, at the man holding it, at the garden where their family had begun to heal. Are you asking because Kwame suggested it? I am asking because I love you. I have loved you since before I knew who you were. I will love you long after we are both old and gray, and Kwame is bossing around his own children with the same confidence he bosses around us. She laughed, the sound bright and free and full of everything she had been holding back. Yes, my answer is yes. The wedding was exactly what you would expect from a ceremony planned by a 7-year-old who had very strong opinions about romance. The cake was shaped like a castle. Kwame had been very insistent about this. The color scheme was green because it was his favorite color, and he argued successfully that he was the most important person at the wedding besides the bride and groom. The guest list included Sister Beatrice, the household staff, carefully selected family members, and approximately 47 of Kwame's closest friends from school, because he could not possibly narrow it down further. And the ring-bearer's speech was legendary. Ladies and gentlemen, Kwame began, standing on a small stool so everyone could see him properly. Today we are here to witness the marriage of my father to my mother. Some of you might think that is a strange thing to celebrate since they are already my parents, but the paperwork was very confusing, and this wedding makes it much simpler to explain. The congregation laughed. Kwame waited patiently for silence. When I was younger, I was very angry. I pushed everyone away because I was scared they would leave like my first mother did. I did not understand that she left because she could not give me what I needed. I just thought there was something wrong with me. Then my real mother came. She did not know she was my real mother at first, but her heart knew, and my heart knew. And we found each other, even though bad people tried very hard to keep us apart. He looked at Ya, who was crying in her beautiful white dress. Mother, you taught me that love is not about never getting hurt. Love is about choosing to try again, even after you have been hurt. You chose to try again with me, even when I was mean to you. You chose to try again with Father, even though he was the reason you got hurt in the first place. That is very brave. Then he looked at Kofi. Father, you taught me that being strong does not mean never making mistakes. It means admitting when you were wrong and doing the work to be better. You were wrong about a lot of things, but you are working very hard to be better. I appreciate that. He turned back to the congregation. In conclusion, this wedding is good because it means we are officially a family forever. Nobody can take that away from us. And if anyone tries, they will have to deal with me. And I am very small, but I am also very determined. He paused, considering. Also, there is cake shaped like a castle, and I have been waiting for it for 3 months. So please, let us hurry up with the vows and get to the reception. The vows were simple. Ya spoke first. Kofi, I spent 6 years believing that the worst thing that could happen had already happened. I thought I had lost everything that mattered. But I was wrong. The worst thing would have been never finding you again, never knowing that our son was alive, never having the chance to build the family we were always meant to be. I forgive you for Lagos, not because what happened was okay, but because holding on to that anger would poison everything beautiful we are building. I choose to let it go. I choose to start fresh. I choose you. Kofi spoke next. Ya, I do not deserve you. I know that. Every day I wake up knowing that I have been given a gift I did not earn. But I promise you this, I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of it. I will be present. I will be patient. I will be the partner you deserve and the father our son needs. I will never run away again. No matter how hard things get, you are my family. You are my home, and I will protect that with everything I have. When they kissed, Kwame cheered loudly and then announced that it was officially cake time. The first year of marriage was a masterclass in learning to be a family. Kofi figured out that leaving work at 6 o'clock would not actually cause his empire to collapse. Ya discovered that she could pursue her interrupted dream of medical school while still being a present mother. Kwame continued to offer unsolicited advice about everything from dinner menus to investment strategies. It was chaotic and beautiful, and exactly what none of them had expected. Then came the announcement. Kwame burst into his parents' bedroom at sunrise on a Saturday, a habit they had tried unsuccessfully to discourage. "I have been monitoring the situation," he declared, "and I believe it is time to discuss my sibling." "Your sibling? The one I requested at your wedding? You have been married for a year now. That is sufficient time for planning." Ya and Kofi exchanged glances. "Actually," Ya said carefully, "we have some news about that." Kwame's eyes went wide. "Are you serious? Is there really going to be a baby?" "Yes, sweetheart. In about 6 months, you are going to be a big brother." The scream of joy that erupted from their son could probably be heard in the next country. "This is the best news in the history of news. I have so much to prepare. I need to research proper baby care techniques. I need to childproof my room. I need to start working on a list of appropriate names." "We were thinking you might want to be involved in choosing the name," Kofi offered. "Obviously, I will be involved. I have already started a list. For a boy, I am considering Benjamin, which means son of the right hand, or Victor, which means winner. For a girl, I am leaning toward Adelaide, which means noble, or Victoria, which also means winner. I like winners. Those are beautiful names." "I know. I researched extensively." He paused, suddenly serious. "This baby is going to have a different experience than I did," he said quietly. "This baby is going to know from the very beginning that it is loved, that it belongs, that nobody is going to take it away." Ya pulled him close. "Yes, baby. This baby is going to know all of those things, just like you know them now. But I did not always know them. For a long time, I felt like I did not belong anywhere. I know, and I am so sorry you had to feel that way. It is not your fault. It is not even really Father's fault, even though he was very problematic in his earlier years." Kofi snorted. "Problematic is one word for it. The point is," Kwame continued, "this baby is lucky. It is going to be born into a family that already knows how to love each other. It is not going to have to figure things out the hard way like I did." "You know," Kofi said, "sometimes I think you are the wisest person in this house." "I am. But it is nice of you to finally acknowledge it." 6 months later, baby Afia Mensa entered the world with healthy lungs and her brother's determined expression. Kwame, who had prepared extensively for this moment, was ready with a speech. "Welcome to the family, little sister," he said, peering into her bassinet. "I am your big brother Kwame. I will be responsible for your education, your entertainment, and ensuring that our parents do not make too many mistakes with you." He glanced at his parents. "They are still learning, but they try very hard." Ya laughed through her exhausted tears. "We do try. I know, and I am proud of both of you. You have come a long way from the disaster you were when I first took over this family. When you took over this family, obviously, who do you think has been running things around here?" He turned back to his sister. "Afia, I am going to teach you everything I know. How to read before the other children, how to negotiate for extra dessert, how to communicate your needs clearly so that adults actually listen, and most importantly, how to love people even when they are imperfect. Because everyone is imperfect, even me, although my imperfections are minimal and mostly charming." He leaned down and kissed her tiny forehead. "You and I are going to have a wonderful life," he whispered. "I am going to make sure of it." And looking at her family, at the husband who had grown into the man she always knew he could be, at the son who had taught them all what resilience looked like, at the daughter who represented a future free from the shadows of the past, Ya finally understood something she had been struggling to accept for years. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us are just the beginning of something beautiful. Sometimes being torn apart is the only way to learn how to come back together. And sometimes if you are very lucky and very brave and very stubborn, you find your way home to people you did not even know you were missing. This story ends where all the best stories end. Not with perfection, not with the absence of problems or challenges or complicated feelings, but with love. Imperfect, messy, hard-won love. The kind that survives separation. The kind that forgives betrayal. the kind that chooses every single day to try again. If this story touched something in your heart, I want you to do something for me. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment telling me about a time when something you thought was the end turned out to be the beginning. Because that is what stories like this are for. They remind us that hope is not naive, that persistence matters, that families come in forms we never expected, and that sometimes the child who rejects everyone is just waiting for the one person who will refuse to be rejected. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this journey. And if you have not already, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell, because I have more stories coming. Stories about love and loss and redemption. Stories that will make you think about your own life differently. Until next time, this is Mr. Andy with Love Stories. Remember, the best stories are not the ones without pain. They are the ones where the pain becomes the reason for the joy.